Welcome everyone to the Level Up REI podcast. This is your host, Lisa Hylton, and today I have yet another amazing guest on the podcast today. Her name is Lori Greymont. So Lori, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lisa.
And can you go ahead and introduce yourself to my listeners?
Sure. So I am a developer, investor in real estate. I've been doing that for well over 30 years. And I run the San Jose REIA, which is one of the larger REIAs in all of Western the United States. A lot of people want to be part of this group because we are the ones that get the deals done, you know. And one of the things that I have always been interested in is how to keep more of what I earn rather than paying Uncle Sam everything. And so I think we're going to talk a little bit about that today.
Exactly. So I have invited Lori to come on the show today to talk about, an alternative to 1031 exchanges. So for those of you listeners who've been listening to my show, you know that I have actually done an episode with the 1031 exchange folks. But here is another alternative to 1031 exchange, to the extent that, hey, you're selling and it just doesn't work for you to do a 1031 exchange. So that's what we're going to get into today. And I'm really excited about that. Before we get started in that though, as you mentioned, Lori, you have been a developer. So you've been in real estate for the past 30 years. And then you are also the president of the San Jose REIA. So could you talk a little bit about how you got started investing in real estate?
So it goes back to my mom, actually. When I was young, we moved into a house that was like a broken house, and we fixed it up. And she liked doing that so much that she went on to another house. We moved into it and we fixed it up. Eventually, we got to the point where we didn't have to live in the houses to fix them up. But, it was a grassroots effort. And so we learned the trades from the inside out. And so when I started having my own children, I thought, what can I do where I can have the flexibility of raising my kids at home, not putting them in daycare, and still do something I love, which is, work, create, add value.
Right.
And so I just kept going. So.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. And so these days, do you focus more, like what are some of the projects that you focus on these days?
So right now with COVID-19, we pulled back from the fix and flip model. You have to, in this industry, you have to kind of be willing to go with the ebb and flow. There's usually about 4 cycles of where real estate is at as far as prices. And you can always make a deal no matter the market. You just have to know where the market's going. And this one is a little different because we don't know, if we're going to go up, if we're going to go down, we're going to go sideways. And so we're kind of sitting on the sideline. We still have our investments that we started working on expecting a recession. And those investments are development or entitlement deals where we do not have a large amount of carry costs. So, our debt is very low. And it's mostly paperwork going through the city. So our risk is low. You want to look at risk and liquidity. Those are the 2 pieces that we have in play right now.
Got it. Okay, awesome. And then what made you decide to, play so actively in the San Jose REIA?
Well, so my girlfriend had actually founded the San Jose REIA, and I lived in Morgan Hill and I didn't necessarily want to come up to San Jose all the time. And so I founded the South Valley REIA. And after a while, she came to me and said, would you like to buy my REIA? I'm done. And I'm like, oh, okay. So there we go. So I just bought it from her.
And then I think I read that since you have taken it over, like it has done phenomenally well.
Yes.
What were some of the things that I guess you put in place to facilitate that growth or stimulate that growth?
I think some of the changes that we made is we really started focusing on deals and deal structures. Most of the people that attend are coming because they actually want to invest. They want to learn to invest. They don't want to just be sitting on the sidelines.
Right.
And so we brought in opportunities where they could make those investments either locally or out of state, passively or actively.
Got
And
it.
we, did polls of the group to see what they were looking for, what their appetite was. So we've provided them with commercial deals, single house deals, syndications, just
Right.
about everything that they want. So by providing them deals, they keep coming back.
Got it. So for listeners listening who are in the San Jose area, granted, so now with COVID, have some of your offerings moved virtual for that REIA?
Yeah, so basically we are not meeting live and we don't anticipate for the rest of the year. So we have decided to offer our meetings for free to anybody who wants to join us online. And that includes our offerings of our products. And so
Got it.
what we do is we have something that we call Net Op. Net Op means networking and opportunity. That's separate from our educational meeting. And our Net Op meetings, when we put it out, you just come with your own beverage of choice, and we have little breakout rooms where you can kind of get to know the people. And then we have a presenter that shares the opportunity that you can invest in.
Wow. Got it. Wow. So creative. Lots of different ways to no wonder people are
Yeah.
coming to that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, for sure. As an investor, like someone listening, and you want to learn more about different opportunities and you want to get started investing, you could tap into, the free virtual meetings that the San Jose REIA is offering at this point. So
Right.
a nice little gift for COVID. And then before we jump into taxes, could we talk a little bit about COVID and how you have seen it impacting the real estate that you play in, and, the focus, how that has sort of caused you to maybe change the way or even reconsider the way in which you're looking at investing going forward?
So before COVID appeared, we kind of anticipated that we would be seeing a recession.
Mhm.
And so I had already started indicating to people, start looking for liquidity and start looking for safety in your investments. And safety investments just means don't over leverage. Make sure that you can service the debt if you lose your job or your tenants don't pay.
Right.
And those are just principles that we learned going through 2008 to 2011.
Mhm.
So when COVID hit, the major impact that I saw was that we had to stop our rehabs for a short period of time because we were actively rehabbing. But having finished one and put it out on the market, there's no inventory and it sold quickly for full price. And so we were very happy about that. As far as viewing, the next deals that we want to go into, we actually put all of our new purchases on hold just because we don't know what the market's going to do. Based on what we're seeing, we do anticipate a correction in the market, nothing like 2008, but we do think it is going to soften maybe by April or May next year. And so that would be a good time to get your money liquid.
Right.
So like if you're selling now, rather than having to go into a 1031, take that liquidity, put it on the sideline, and wait for the buying opportunity.
Awesome. So that's perfect, because that's a great segue into the alternatives to 1031 exchange. So can you talk a little bit about what are the alternatives to 1031 exchange?
Yeah. So there are quite a few different alternatives out there. The one that I found is based on tax code M453, and it's an installment sale tax code. And a lot of people have heard of this through the DST, the Delaware Statutory Trust, or the Deferred Sales Trust. That's not what we're doing here. This is a little bit different than that. But it uses the principle of the tax code that says, if you sell a house or an asset, it can be a business, it can be any kind of asset, but you don't receive all of your sales proceeds up front, meaning you're only going to get a portion of them. You only have to pay taxes on the portion you get. So if we take that and we think, okay, how can we construct a sale so that we don't receive our sales proceeds, so that we don't have to pay our taxes?
Right.
And so we construct an installment sale that is interest only for 30 years. So at the end of 30 years, you receive your sales proceeds. So now it's taxable.
Right.
But during the interim, the only thing that is taxable is the interest income that you earn on it. Now, a lot of people might go, I just don't want monthly payments.
Right.
Well, we have a private lender that will actually make a business loan, and give you a lump sum that you get to walk away with in exchange for those payments. So they'll take the payments, you get the money, and you have a tax-free cash at closing. Because loans aren't taxable either.
Right.
But basically, we have set up a system where we put two parties together. One defers the taxes and one gets you tax-free cash.
Got
and
it.
you get to move forward with your money.
Wow. So could we dive into an example, like say for someone who's selling their own property? So,
Yes.
so like maybe someone that owns maybe a duplex or a fourplex and they're selling it maybe for, we'll get into later the dollar amounts that make sense for this.
Right. Right.
But like say if we simple $100,000 or, you know, maybe $1 million or something,
Okay.
whatever is easier.
Yeah, so let's just start with easy numbers. Let's say that you live in California and
Right.
you're selling an investment property, and the gain on that property is about $1 million.
Right.
What most people don't realize is how much you're going to be paying in taxes on that $1 million. You know, we've kind of all thought, oh, well, you know, capital gains is 15 or 20%. That's all I'm going to pay. But the reality is most of the people who sell and have $1 million gain will pay anywhere from $300,000 to $450,000 of their gain in taxes. So that's 30 to 45% in taxes that it's gone. Once it's gone, it's gone. And this is why people exchange assets, because they don't want to lose that much of their gain. So one of the things I tell people is that we can defer that tax bill. Now, if we had mentioned before, if we defer it for 30 years, if you have $300,000,
Right.
and we defer the taxes for 30 years, and you invested that at 8% compounded interest, that $300,000 will grow to over $3 million in those 30 years.
Mm.
Now, if you had that $3 million, can you pay the $300,000 tax bill pretty easily?
Yeah, exactly. You can, definitely.
You can. So this is what we do with our sellers. We do charge a fee. It's about 6.5%. So you're going to pay a fee. So out of the $1 million gain, you'll get $937,000.
Right.
But the $937,000 is way more than the $600,000 you would net if you had to pay the taxes, right?
That's right.
So that you can use that money. And the thing that people forget about is inflation. What's a dollar going to be worth in 30 years?
Exactly.
Okay, so now you're paying back your tax bill with 30-year inflated dollars.
Right, exactly. So couple things regarding the gain. I think that the way I understood was that when you say you sold the property for like say $1 million, but your cost basis in that property was say like maybe 500,000 because it's California and everything sort of appreciates when you hold for so long. Then ultimately, well, actually your gain would have to be like how much you would have had to buy that property for. Your gain is actually 1 million. So in order for your gain to be 1 million, then your cost basis would have to have been significantly less than 500,000, right?
Yeah. So in that scenario, yes. So let's just say that you, so I have a client, and I'll just use their exact numbers here. So I had a client that bought a property in 2001.
Right.
They paid $450,000.
Got it.
In 2001. They sold it in 2019 for 1.8.
Got it.
Okay. So that means that they had a gain of 1.2. No, I'm sorry.
1.4-ish.
1.35. Oh,
Yeah.
1.35. So that's what their gain was 1.35. So then they would have to pay taxes on that. But here's the other part that most people forget. When you take depreciation as an expense, so they had depreciation for 18 years, they actually have to recapture 25% of their depreciation and pay taxes on that.
Yeah.
So that was like another, 100,000 that they were having to recapture and then, pay taxes on. Then we have the net income tax, which is 3.8%. And so by the time they were done paying state tax, capital gains, recapture, and the net income tax, they had 42% of that 1.3 million going away in taxes. 42%. And you know, and the government didn't even help take out the trash or repair the roof. So, you know, if you want to cut expenses, the biggest expense almost always is your taxes.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly. So, so fast forwarding onto this, like, what are some of the pros and cons of sort of choosing to do this program versus a 1031 exchange?
Okay. So the key is the transaction becomes taxable when you have something called constructive receipt. When you receive your sales proceeds, it's called constructive receipt.
Mm-hmm.
Both of these programs defer constructive receipt. When you do a 1031, you don't get your cash is going in another investment. When you do this program, you're not getting your cash, you're getting a tax-free loan. So you're deferring on both of the scenarios. Right. The difference is this one, you walk away with cash that you can use for perpetuity. You never have to pay it back because your other money is going to be used to pay it back.
Right.
And so it's a way to get liquid without having to wait. If you're in a 1031 and you want cash, it's called boot.
Right.
And if you have boot, you have to pay taxes on it.
Yeah.
So when you access that cash, now you're paying taxes. And so that's the biggest difference. Another difference is depreciation. In a 1031, whatever you bought that first property for, and then you roll it over, that becomes your rollover basis. So you don't get the full value of the new asset because you've already depreciated some of the prior asset.
Yeah.
So that can make a difference. You know, in this client's case, it made a difference of $1 million of depreciation. Wow. So they were going into a $3 million property from the 1.8 into a $3 million property. So they cashed out and bought the property for $3 million. They got full depreciation again.
Got it. Instead
of, you know, partial depreciation because they had the original asset for 18 years. And then after 27.5, the first asset goes away and they only can depreciate a portion of the second asset. It's a huge thing. If you're trying to shelter income, one of the best ways to shelter income is depreciation.
Right. Exactly.
Because it's not a real expense, right? It's something that you get to shelter your income. So you want your depreciation expense as high as possible. The best way to make it high as possible is to buy the asset cash.
Right. Exactly. So then ultimately this route enables you to get that cash to then buy it. Exactly. So I'm curious about, you know, when you ultimately go through an intermediary as well. Yes. Underneath this program as well. And they ultimately then take that money and then they ultimately lend it back to you. Right.
You got to think about it as two separate transactions. The first transaction that we do with you is we defer your taxes. Correct. The second transaction that we do with you is we make a non-recourse loan, business loan that you get. Okay. So that non-recourse unsecured business loan is what you're going to use to go buy your next asset.
Got it. And then
eventually, the loan gets paid off because your sales proceeds are sitting with the intermediary who pays them off.
Ah, okay. But that's not until like 30 years later.
Right. Exactly.
Got it. And then during this whole time period, are you paying interest on that loan?
So that loan does have an interest expense, but if you remember, on your installment, you're getting an interest income.
Right.
Okay. So you take the interest income and you pay off the interest expense and they match each other.
Oh, okay.
So there's no net cost or expense. And we have one step even better. We do it automatically. So you don't have to remember. There's no hassle. It's completely hassle-free for 30 years.
Wow. So, you know, someone listening is probably thinking, wow, like, how did I not know about this?
Right.
So well, can you talk about that?
Yeah. So it's not uncommon, especially when we talk to tax attorneys and CPAs. They're like, well, I've never heard of this before. It must not be true. Well, if you're talking with somebody who thinks they've heard of everything, they should be gone, right? But the reality is that multi-million dollar companies have been doing this for many, many years. And if you go out and research it on the internet, you would see that they've done it, like Timber, now I'm forgetting their name, Office Max, Timberland, there's a lot of companies that have already done this. And the IRS in 1980, so I mean, here we are in 2020,
Sure.
In 1980, they said, yes, you can get a loan in relationship with an installment sale and still get the tax deferral.
Wow.
So it has been around. And actually, M453 in the tax code, the installment sale, has been around longer than 1031s.
Wow.
So the reason it's just now coming available is because we have the two parties. We have somebody that knows how to defer your taxes.
Right.
And to make the loan. So we have two separate companies that know how to work together, where we can give you a plug and play system that now we can do it without having a stable of attorneys to orchestrate it for us.
Got it. Got it. And then, what happens if the person dies before the 30 years?
That's a brilliant question. And almost everyone asks. Nothing. Okay. So a lot of my clients are, I would say 60 plus, and they're wanting to cash out. They don't want to take on more debt, because when you do a 1031, you have to have equal or more debt. They want the cash because it makes them feel more comfortable. So they're like, all right, I want to do this, but I don't want to burden my kids or my grandkids with this whole trying to remember what I'm supposed to do in 30 years.
Right.
Well, it's easy, because first of all, we set it up with automatic escrows. So everything happens automatically. The only thing that has to happen is you need to pay the escrow fee every year. Okay, so you set that up with your trustee of your estate. If you pass away, this asset is in your estate just like every other asset. The liability is in your estate. It just sits there. And every year the payments happen, the tax return happens. And if you really want to, you can buy an investment that will grow, that will pay the tax bill in 30 years. Because remember, we talked about that $300,000. Let's say that was your tax bill today, and you invested that in an annuity and said, all right, tax bill's taken care of. Now I'm going to go use the rest of the money.
Right.
You could still do that, but at least you and your heirs are getting the benefit of that money growing.
Exactly. Wow, that's so amazing.
Yeah.
So what would happen if, I've known people who have started down the path of a 1031 exchange.
Yes.
And just didn't find, time ran out. They either identified properties and those were just not the properties that worked for them. At the end of the day, they just ran out of time and just wasn't able to select something to invest in. Can they then turn around and, utilize this kind of program? Or would it be too late?
Yes, too late. So here's the thing. This program cannot rescue a failed 1031. A failed 1031 is failed. And you lost all of your tax exemptions, basically. Because if that money comes to you, you now have constructive receipt. There's no way to undo constructive receipt.
Got it.
But let's say that before you close, you want the option, and like you're still researching this program, and you are either going to do a 1031 or this program.
Right.
Okay? We have a 1031 accommodator that works with both. So you can place your money with this group and have the choice. Within 45 days, you can identify a property. Within 180 days, you can choose to do this program, or you can buy your property. So it gives you options to move forward. And that's what we typically recommend for our clients. But this cannot save a 1031. The only option right now is to go into something like an opportunity zone, where you can take whatever your gain was and invest it in an opportunity zone fund and still defer that till 2026.
Got it. Okay. Gotcha. Awesome. And then what are some of the parties involved in this program? I think we touched on, the lender and the intermediary, but did I cover everything, or are there some other parties that we need to think about?
Well, typically what we do is we work with the title company, okay? And before you get your cash, we ask that you set up an account with our 1031 person. And the main reason is that if your money goes to another 1031 intermediary and we don't have a relationship with them, we won't be able to help you and they won't release your money. So it's really critical that if you think you want to do this, that you start working with our intermediary right away before the money gets there. And then you still have the same options, 1031 or working with our program. So they work with our, I guess I would call it our capital asset dealer. That's
Okay.
the one who actually receives your sales proceeds so that you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have our private lender that gives you the loan amount almost equal to your sales proceeds. So you don't have a tax bill and you have the cash to move forward.
Nice. Awesome. Awesome. And then, also branching off from that, some of my listeners are people who passively invest in, syndication opportunities that, wide variety of different types of assets.
Mm-hmm.
Could they use this kind of program if they are given word by the general partner that, hey, we're going to sell the asset, and the general partner has decided that they are not doing a 1031 exchange?
Yes. Yeah, so the key would be for us to start working with the general partner to make sure that all the funds first go to our 1031 accommodator, because then we don't have constructive receipt. And then those that don't want to do this program and don't want to do a 1031 can actually take constructive receipt of their funds. But those who want some deferral program have not received their funds. So yes, and this is one of the things that we work with is a lot of the syndicators, maybe you have listeners that are syndicators
Mm-hmm.
and somebody's coming to them, with $500,000 coming out of a 1031.
Right.
If they can get them into this program, then they can bring the cash into this program, and it makes it easier for you as a syndicator because
Right.
now you don't have to have special paperwork to bring them in.
Exactly. And you don't need to create these tick entities and all that
No,
other stuff.
exactly.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. I'm like, to be honest, I discovered you through Facebook. You were having an interview with Adam Adams,
Yes.
and I saw and I was like, what is this? Like, I've never heard of this before. Like, this is just so fascinating. And I think,
It is.
there's a book I think Amanda Hahn wrote for Bigger Pockets, and she
Yes.
goes that in the US there's two types of tax codes. There's one for the people who know, and then there's one for the people who don't know, and both are legal. And
Yes.
I think this episode is so on point that if you just don't know, you just don't know. So hopefully with this episode, there are people who have sort of learned something and can, reach out to yourself to learn more about how they could potentially execute this and not pay, tons of money in taxes.
Well, and Lisa, the benefit of this isn't just real estate. It's also for businesses, because businesses, if you're selling a business, you don't get the benefit of a 1031 anymore.
Right.
So, this is one way you can defer the taxes, like if you're a doctor's office, vet office, that kind
Wow.
of thing. It's huge for that.
Dang, that's amazing. So then connected to that, on the 1031, you have to do like kind. So if you're coming out of say a syndication, you'd have to go into another syndication. So with this program, because you're getting cash, you have the flexibility to move into something completely different, whatever you'd like.
That's correct. Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah. So if I can share a story, I mean,
Sure.
We can even separate different assets. So for example, one of the clients that called me, his dad had passed away, left a property for him and his two brothers in San Francisco. So they each were going to get a sizable gain. Two of the three of them wanted to 1031. He did not. He just wanted his cash and he wanted to go in the stock market, which he understood. So we moved all their funds to our 1031 accommodator. The two brothers went forward and did theirs. He took his cash out through our program and everybody was happy. Now,
Amazing.
the reason I mention that is maybe
Yeah.
you have a scenario where you want part cash and you want part 1031.
Mm.
If we can do it with individuals, we can do it with you as one person too.
Wow, fascinating. And then the last thing is, do you have a limit in terms of the dollar amount that you guys work with for this program?
Okay, so we don't have a top limit, but we do have a bottom limit. You need to have a transaction of 500,000 or more, because that's typically where all of a sudden the taxes start to make sense for the fee that we charge. Because if you
Right.
remember, we charge a 6.5% fee.
Sure.
It's not much to have access to your money for 30 years. It's really actually very minimal. And if you go back into another asset that gets depreciation within 1 year, you've made that up
Right.
in the savings. But we do save 500,000. And I have a calculator. What I like to do is I like to work with each person's scenario individually
Mhm.
and show them what our program would offer them versus paying the taxes.
Right.
And then they can make the decision if it's going to work. I'll put them in contact with our professionals. We have a whole team of legal professionals that we can refer them to that they can do their own due diligence on.
Got it. And then with that, like, is someone who's thinking, you know what, maybe I can just do this on my own. Um, can you talk about why maybe that might not be a good idea,
Well,
perhaps?
I like the do-it-yourselfers,
Yes.
So here's the thing. This program has been developed and refined and audited and refined and has stood the time test. The gentleman that developed it is a very brilliant attorney, and I wouldn't even try to do it unless you've got a group of attorneys that
Right.
can help orchestrate it, because you have to have two separate legitimate transactions. You can't just like pretend. They have to be two separate transactions. Your loan cannot be secured by the payments
Right.
on that installment. They have to be separate. That's the key, is that you need to have an unsecured loan and you need to have the installment sale as two separate transactions. And if you can orchestrate that, where you can get an unsecured loan and you can have the installment sale and they're completely separate transactions, then I think that's awesome. But I think that's very difficult.
Right. Exactly. Nice. Well, at this point, I don't have any other questions. Is there anything else that, my listeners should know about regarding, this program?
Well, some people say, well, why would the IRS allow this?
Mm-hmm.
This sounds too good to be true. Why would the IRS allow it? So as I mentioned, in 1980, they said, yes, you can receive a loan in connection with an installment sale and still get the tax deferral.
Right.
In 2012, there was a memorandum that came out in regards to this. And the reason is that it creates more commerce. It creates more money commerce that can then be taxed. And so
Right.
the IRS is in support of doing this type of method. So it's not something that's really new. It's just not something that we know about, just because it takes two parties.
Right. To get it done.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. So if my listeners would like to learn more about you, where could they go to find more about you?
So you can learn a little bit more on our Defer Tax Get Cash website. So it's www.defertaxgetcash.com. Or if you want to book a consult with me, if you've got an active property that you're looking at selling, it's listed, but you haven't received the money yet, go ahead out to my website. It's www.callwithlori.com. And you can book
Awesome.
a time on my calendar.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lori, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity, Lisa.
You're welcome. Thank you again, Lori, for coming on the show. What an amazing episode. I had no idea when I saw this heard this and saw the video on Facebook for the first time. I was like, what? Like, is this real? Is this even possible? So if you're listening today and you're like, wow, I had no idea that this was possible. Like, real estate investors, as well as people who own businesses, this is a program that can sort of help you, to defer taxes and ultimately be able to take that money and continue investing it, creating more businesses, buying more real estate, whatever the case is. Definitely, an awesome program, and definitely get started. If you reach out to Lori, she gave her information at the end of the show. Definitely tell her that you heard it on the Level Up REI podcast with the host, Lisa Hylton, for sure. So until next time, guys, keep leveling up. Take care. Bye.